Thanks for joining us today. Today I'm going to be covering the updates to the USDA organic regulations that took effect last year, and specifically how those changes impact entities that work mostly within the middle of the supply chain. So your brokers, your importers, distributors, traders of organic products, and so on. But before we get started, I'd like to take just a minute to introduce myself. So my name is Brandon. I've been with SCS Global Services for about the last 14 years, and I've been in and around organic agriculture all of my life, so this is really an area of passion for me. Growing up in Northern California, I come from a farming family and spent my young adulthood managing our organic apple and pear farm in the Sierra Nevada foothills. For the last 14 years, I've been with SCS. We're an auditing and certification company based in Northern California, right near the heart of one of the world's largest and most productive agricultural regions. So most of my tenure with SCS has been in management roles within the organic program, including time spent for many years as the program's technical director. My current role is as the Senior Director of Business Development for our Food and Agriculture Division. But having said that, organic is what's near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to be here today talking about what I love and know the best. So thank you for joining me. So by now, hopefully all of you have heard of USDA's Strengthening Organic Enforcement Initiative, known and commonly referred to as SOE. If this is the first time you're hearing of it, well, it's better late than never, so I'm glad that you made it today. SOE refers to a set of updates basically to the organic regulations that took effect March of last year and went under full enforcement since September. So we're now around 8 months into full enforcement of SOE. And probably the most significant change to the regulations was the removal of various exemptions from certification that used to exist prior to the updated rulemaking. So today I'm going to cover some of the background for strengthening organic enforcement, and then we'll go into some of the types of operations that are still granted exemption and which operations that were formerly exempt and now require certification. After all, many of the traders, brokers, distributors, probably including many of you in this crowd today, were formerly exempt. And then we'll get into the regulatory and documentation requirements for importers of organic products. So again, this is where we've seen some of the most significant changes to USDA's rulemaking under SOE. I'll cover some of the basics around fraud prevention, including what should be included in your organic fraud prevention plan. And then I'll bring us home today with covering an overview of the various ways that you can maintain your business continuity as you prepare for and undertake the organic certification process. And then again, at the end of the session today, we'll have a few minutes for Q&A. So let's dive right in here to strengthening organic enforcement, including some of the motivators really, and kind of the problem that USDA was trying to address with the development of this new rulemaking. So USDA organic certification falls under the National Organic Program, which is a subdivision of USDA's Agriculture Marketing Service. So that's where the program lives within the branch of the federal government. It's under USDA. And really the roots of organic certification in the United States dates back to the Organic Food Production Act of 1990. But the current scheme, as we've come to know it, began in the year 2000 under the National Organic Program. And since the establishment of the National Organic Program, otherwise known as NOP, the regulations have been, well, largely unchanged for the last 25 years. Well, over the last quarter century, the industry has evolved a lot, and this really is a long overdue update to the organic regulations. SOE was undertaken really to achieve goals in 4 basic areas. Closing the existing gaps, which means fewer exemptions and exclusions from certification, and that really is impacting largely operators in the middle of the supply chain. Some regulations have not always been uniformly applied from one certifier to the next. So the National Organic Program is wanting to get all the certification bodies on the same page here with how they apply the regulations. So they've added some specificity in areas where they saw some divergence, I think, between how one certifier to the next might be interpreting those regulations. There's also been a major emphasis placed on fraud detection and fraud prevention. The past decade has seen a number of high-profile cases involving organic fraud, ranging from the use of prohibited materials, forged or altered documents, integrating conventional product into the organic supply chain, and so on. And SOE requires that all certifiers and certified operations adopt improved measures, basically to detect and deter fraud within their operation or within their supply chain. And finally, NOP is really wanting to improve transparency across the supply chain. So certainly having fewer uncertified operations, these ones that were previously exempt, that goes a long way. But they're also expanding oversight on international trade, requiring the use of NOP organic import certificates, for example, for all shipments coming into the United States. So we'll go into this in greater detail here as we advance through the presentation today. So really, SOE does bring a lot of benefits here along with it. And these benefits are designed to improve trust in the organic label. So that's achieved by adding rigor at all levels of the organic supply chain, increasing documentation requirements, increasing certifier oversight and investigation expectations, and so on. Ensures equity across certified operations. If there's an assurance that all certifiers are interpreting the regulations the same and playing from the same rulebook here, really it should give everybody equal footing regardless of who they're working with. And a lot of these fraud prevention measures that have been put into place really should serve as a deterrent for bad actors, meaning that we're trying to decrease the likelihood and the impact of organic fraud across the industry. And again, all of this is expected to drive improved trust in the organic label. So one of the key focal points for SOE was on exemptions and exclusions from certification. So which operations now require certification and which ones don't? So what we're seeing now is that exemptions are really, really limited. Prior to strengthening organic enforcement, exemptions from certification were made much more wide-ranging. For example, most brokers and traders, importers, distributors previously were able to operate in the organic marketplace without certification. Many of these operations used to be exempt, especially if they were not repacking organic products, applying labels, and so on. So many of these types of operations, and probably many of you in attendance today, are either box in, box out operations, or maybe you're even a trader that doesn't take physical possession of organic products. Well, many of you now do require certification, even if you were previously operating under exemptions. So really what we're seeing now is that the exemptions from certification are granted to very small operations that are grossing under $5,000 in organic sales annually. If you're only handling products that contain less than 70% organic ingredients, distributors of retail product in tamper-evident packaging. This is one of the more notable exceptions and one of really the only examples of a distributor or a broker or a trader that still can be exempt. And that's if you're only transacting or trading product in retail packaging that is tamper-evident and fully sealed. Warehouses that store or prepare for shipment organic products that are in sealed tamper-evident packaging. If they're storage-only warehouses, like third-party logistics warehouses, for example, they're still exempt, with the caveat that they're providing storage-only services. They cannot buy or sell organic products. And then transportation companies, customs and logistics brokers, and some retail operations still do fall within the limited exemptions afforded under the National Organic Program currently. Exempt operations, however, still do need to comply with the record-keeping requirements that support identity preservation. So, for example, if you are a warehouse that is providing storage-only services, the movements of that organic product from whomever is storing them there through storage at the warehouse and then through onward downstream transport, that documentation still does need to show all movements of that organic product in a way that it can be traced. Importers and exporters now need to be certified. So even if the product does not go to a warehouse that they operate, if you're the importer of record or the exporter of record, and we'll get into this in greater detail later, that activity does require certification. Really, most activities now do require organic certification. So that includes the buying and selling of organic products, storage of organic products, and loading or unloading organic products. Again, one notable exception is distributors that are distributing only organic products that are packaged for retail sale. The regulations, however, are clear that buying and selling organic products does require certification. So again, unless you're only buying and selling retail product, even if you're buying and selling bulk product and never take possession, you still do require certification. So the following activities basically that do require certification, again, buying, selling, storage, loading or unloading. Now, again, third-party logistics warehouses that are storage only do not require certification. However, warehouses that might store, for example, produce that are in open boxes that are not impermeable or are not fully tamper evident, they'll likely need to be certified. Transloading is a little bit of a tricky one here. So the Agricultural Marketing Services, which is where NOP lives, does not actually have the authority to regulate transport. So transloading between two modes of transportation, so from a rail car to a trailer, for example, does not require certification. However, the loading and unloading of products into storage at a facility is not considered transport. So transloading activities from, say, a grain silo to a rail car does require certification. So again, if we're talking about just loading or unloading from one conveyance to another, that can be exempt. However, unloading into storage, in and out of facilities, in and out of grain silos, that does need to be certified. So what are the implications for distributors, brokers, traders that operate in the middle of the supply chain? So first of all, you're going to need to work with an organic certifier like SCS to obtain certification. You're going to need to develop an organic system plan. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what an organic system plan or an OSP is, don't worry, we're going to cover that here in a few minutes. And you'll need to undergo an annual compliance audit. So that would be an initial audit prior to obtaining certification, and then an annual audit cycle thereafter that is established basically on the anniversary date of when you first obtained your certification. Regulations have become more explicit with regard to documentation and record keeping, specifically that records need to span the time of purchase or acquisition through production to the sale or transport of the product. And traceability for products or ingredients must be maintained back to the last certified operation. Some supply chains are still going through growing pains, while previously uncertified operations are still working on their certification. So, for example, operations are sometimes having to rotate in new suppliers, and sometimes they're finding that it's better to have 2 or 3 redundancies in place instead of just one, while some of these suppliers within your supply chains are still obtaining their certification. Organic importers are also being affected here, possibly the most immediately affected, in that they require certification. However, there's a notable change to the documentation requirements and process flow now for importing organic products. So in addition to the requirement to become certified, to work with a USDA accredited agent, to develop and maintain an organic system plan, the National Organic Program is now requiring NOP import certificates for all shipments of organic products into the United States. So I'll be going into that in greater detail a little bit later on here today. And since September 19th of last year, which is when enforcement went into full effect, organic shipments into the US have been rejected if they don't meet the documentation requirements. So this has been going on for about the last 8 months, and will still go on as long as there are uncertified importers of organic products that are continuing to work towards their certification. So what we're seeing is that this is leading to some disruptions in organic supply chains. The first thing that comes to mind, I think, with everybody that has been affected by strengthening organic enforcement is the downside, right? Disruptions to your supply chain. There's a new learning curve here. Whereas operations that did not previously require certification, they're having to become familiar with a new set of regulations. They're having to familiarize themselves with the organic audit cycle, gain a deeper understanding of product traceability, segregation, identity preservation within the facility, and so on. So yes, it is definitely a learning curve. Yes, there has been some disruption. However, let's not lose sight of the intention of these updates in the first place. Again, there are some real tangible benefits here. So fewer uncertified actors within the supply chain, especially in areas where fraud is most common, i.e. products that are coming from overseas, products that were previously transacted through uncertified operations. Requiring them now to become certified means improved transparency. Everybody is undergoing an annual audit. Everybody is under the oversight of an organic certifier. So since by and large across your supply chain, you'll now be required to work directly with certified operations, everybody has skin in the game here and everybody has that same level of oversight. So that protects the entire supply chain against organic fraud. And since product is now being transacted from one certified operation to another, it's a lot easier to detect and deter fraud. It's a lot harder to commit fraud, meaning that it's a lot less likely that fraud is going to occur within your supply chain. Okay, we've made the case for strengthening organic enforcement, some of the background as to why they undertook this effort in the first place, and I've explained how importers and supply chains will be affected. So let's dive a little bit deeper now into the regulations and the requirements for organic importers. To begin, I'll just define some of the key terminology here. And to think of it simply, just really be thinking who is the importer of record and who is the exporter of record on that transaction documentation, right? So the organic importer is the operation responsible for accepting imported organic products into the United States and ensuring that NOP import certificate data are entered into the US Customs and Border Protection system. The exporter is the final certified exporter of the organic product who facilitates the trade, consigns, or arranges the transport or shipping of organic agricultural product from a foreign country into the United States. So the importer is going to be based here in the United States, although it is possible that they have a trade office that is offshore, but they're the entity that's receiving the product here into the US, and the exporter is going to be located outside of the US, oftentimes who you're purchasing product from or who is facilitating the export of that product from the EU or from Asia or from Great Britain into the United States. And an NOP import certificate is issued to the exporter by its certifier. So that certification body verifies the organic status of the product that is being shipped. They're going to do a traceability exercise. They're going to do a mass balance exercise to ensure that the exporting operation can demonstrate the organic status of that product. And that NOP import certificate will follow that shipment until it arrives here stateside. And then the organic importer or the customs broker is going to receive the product with the NOP import certificate. All of the import data should have been already entered into Customs and Border Protection so that when it arrives at US shores, that documentation is linked to that shipment and it can clear customs. So some of the key regulatory changes for organic importers, really starting with that, again, international trade is only between certified organizations. So NOP to NOP. So there are certain jurisdictions where their organic standards have been deemed equivalent to NOP regulations. That would be Canada, European Union, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Switzerland, and the UK. So if you are working with an exporter based in any of those locations, Canada, EU, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Switzerland, or the UK, they will be certified to their own national standard because it has been deemed equivalent to NOP. However, if you're importing from a country without an organic program that is deemed equivalent to NOP, say China, India, all of South America, any location that is not on that list of equivalent standards, those exporters must be certified to the USDA organic regulations. Their supply chains must be certified to the USDA organic regulations. And so this means basically that by requiring that all imports are declared and reported to US Customs and Border Protection, that there are going to be fewer areas where identity preservation for organic products can go dark in the audit trail. Everyone has their certification on the line here. So meaning that all entities in the supply chain are a lot more likely in a way to be a watchdog of sorts, right? By this, I mean that they're going to be motivated to deter and detect organic fraud. So that's a real benefit, is requiring trade between only certified entities. And the organic import certificate, again, is the strongest verification method that we have to date to verify the status of product coming into the US. Again, it's mandatory for all imported products, regardless of the origin. So if it's coming from a location where there is an equivalent standard, they're still going to have an NOP import certificate issued. So we're going to get back to the import certificates in just a moment, but I first wanted to go over the organic audit cycle and certification process. So for those that are still uncertified and unfamiliar with this process, the first thing that you're going to work on is the development of an organic system plan, otherwise known as an OSP. So what this does, it describes all of the activities that support your organic handling or your organic production process. You're going to maintain a product list of all of the organic products that you produce or that you trade or that you import, and a supplier list that discloses the source for all of those organic products or organic inputs. You'll be describing your production flow and procedures. Product packaging and labeling will need to be designed and shared with your certifier for approval. You'll be describing your record-keeping practices for how you maintain traceability of organic products, how you prevent commingling and segregate your products. And you'll develop a fraud prevention plan, which we'll go into here in just a little bit. And then the organic inspection cycle and recertification cycle, it plays out annually. So again, you'll have an initial inspection, and then that will be renewed on an annual basis. And during that audit, your inspector is going to visit all areas of the operation. So if you take possession of organic products, they're going to follow those products basically through your facility, through your possession. If you're processing, we'll observe your processing lines, your ingredient blending areas, your storage of raw materials, of finished goods. If you don't take possession of organic product, that inspection is still going to be on site. Often these inspections are done just in an office. If you're a trader and you never see this organic product, we'll still be there with you, going through your documentation, auditing a representative selection of them. Yes, you can host an inspection in your home office. Yes, you can host an inspection in the Starbucks that's down the road if your home office is too small to host an inspection. But we will do that initial inspection on site so that we can be there with you looking at the documentation together. We'll be reviewing your audit trail just to make sure that identity preservation is maintained, that products are traceable through unique identifiers such as purchase orders, lot codes, invoice numbers, and so on. And then after the inspection, your inspector will submit their report to SCS. We'll review it, and then we'll issue any findings that came from the audit with a period of resolution. So don't worry, almost every organic audit, even if you've been doing this for many years, findings are a normal part of this process. So don't fear, being issued findings. Don't fear that you're going to be found non-compliant, because you are offered an opportunity to resolve those findings, and it's a perfectly normal of this component of the certification process. Okay, so going back to NOP import certificates in a little bit more detail here. Again, these are required for all shipments of product into the United States. They are issued electronically by the certifier of the exporter using the National Organic Program's Organic Integrity Database. So this is a great resource. You can look up organic certificates, organic certified entities, the products that they're certified for on Organic Integrity Database. It is also used as the platform to support the trade of organic product. Each audit trail is reviewed by the issuing certifier to verify the organic status of that product that's being shipped to the United States. And some of the information that goes on the NOP import certificate, which you'll see here in just a moment, includes the product origin, the destination, the name of the certifier who issued the import certificate, harmonized tariff codes, product weight, the digital exporter ID, and a unique numerical identifier is linked to each NOP import certificate as well. These certificates can be issued for a single shipment or can be issued for a defined time frame that can cover multiple shipments up to a certain ceiling of volume. So, for example, if you're trading grain, from overseas and it's coming from one source, but across many shipments, sometimes these NOP import certificates can be used for a period in time to cover multiple shipments into the United States. So here's an example of what a completed import certificate might look like. You see here towards the top the source data, basically who issued the certificate, who it was exported by, the recipient in the United States, the country of origin, date, and the unique identifier. Import certificates should be issued prior to the shipment leaving port of embarkation. So at the time of issuance, the shipping identification number, vessel name, container number, and so on may not be known. So that's okay. Certifiers can actually issue the import certificate without information about, say, the vessel number. And then what they'll do is once they know that information, they'll usually then update an amended certificate. And that will be posted in the Organic Integrity Database once the vessel information is known. So this is just kind of a visualization of the workflow for issuing NOP import certificates from the issuance of the certificate to the clearance of the shipment and oversight. So the exporter of the organic product will initiate this request with their certifier, and their certifier will verify the organic status of the shipment and issue the NOP import certificate. The exporter will provide the certificate to the US importer, who will then either on their own or via their customs broker enter that data into the US Customs and Border Protection automated control environment known as the ACE system. And then the product will arrive at the port of entry. That unique identifier from the NOP import certificate will be linked to that shipment, and it will be accepted into the United States. The importer will then verify the products received, that they match the import certificate data, and then the certifier of the importer will audit the volumes that they've accepted. So generally this happens during the annual certification audit. However, certifiers are sometimes checking in with their importers, especially those that are operating at a high volume or at a high frequency from time to time, just to do a spot check of the shipments that they've accepted into the United States. And then the National Organic Program will access the CBP data to do their own monitoring for fraudulent activities. So NOP and CBP are working really hand in glove here to ensure the security of products that are being imported into the United States. So we'll have a discussion now about organic fraud prevention. After all, oftentimes the riskier supply chains can involve imported product linked to certain geographies. And again, this is really one of the main drivers behind strengthening organic enforcement. NOP is taking a multi-pronged approach to fraud prevention, including some of the things that we've already discussed. So requiring operations to become certified, increased traceability requirements that require traceability to the last certified operation, NOP import certificates. These are all significant components of the fight against organic fraud. However, in addition to this, certified operations are also required to have a specific plan in place to detect, deter, and report fraud. So let's dive into this a little bit. There are some significant updates here to the regulations under strengthening organic enforcement that really get right to the heart of the matter of organic fraud. One here is, again, the requirement that operations must maintain records that span the time of purchase or acquisition through production to the sale and transport of organic products and must be traceable to the last certified operation. The other requirement here is that certified operations must develop, document, and implement a robust fraud prevention plan as part of their OSP. So this should be a written plan. It should be a living plan that is updated to reflect, the current critical control points and risks that might occur within your facility, that might occur within your supply chain. And there's a lot more rigorous oversight now by certifiers as well. So we're conducting risk-based supply chain traceability audits, identifying high-risk operations that are going to be subject to increased scrutiny. So that could mean more unannounced inspections or more supply chain traceability audits. We're reporting evidence of fraud to the USDA to initiate joint investigations between USDA and certifiers. And we're also cooperating with other certifiers on investigative and auditing activities. So we'll start by defining fraud here. When we say fraud, what does that actually mean? So let me start by providing definitions for food fraud and organic food fraud. So food fraud is the deceptive representation, sale, or labeling of, this is actually the definition for organic food fraud. So I have these swapped actually here. Food fraud is the deliberate and intentional substitution, addition, tampering, or misrepresentation of food, packaging, labeling claims, or other statements for economic gain. So again, these are actually flip-flopped here. Where organic food fraud is the deceptive representation, sale, or labeling of non-organic agricultural products or ingredients as organic, 100% organic, or made with organic ingredients. And some of you may have heard of the 10-80-10 rule, which kind of dives into the psychology of fraud here a little bit. Largely what motivates that 80% who may commit fraud under certain conditions. It's what's referred to as the fraud triangle. So the 10-80-10 rule is basically saying that 10% of people will never commit fraud. 80%, if the conditions are right and the opportunity exists, may commit fraud. And then 10% are the bad actors that are always seeking opportunities to commit fraud, always trying to kind of work the system here. So most people here fall within 80%. And the motivating factors really that can lead to an increased likelihood of fraud here are what's called the fraud triangle. So one of these factors would be that there's an incentive. Management or employees, for example, have something to gain or are subject to certain pressures. So usually this is driven by economics, the pressure to meet a sales quota, to gain or maintain a key client contract, or so on. Opportunity. So that means that conditions exist which enable someone to commit fraud. So this could be the perception of weak oversight. It could be access to certain resources, knowledge, individuals, or so on that make fraud possible. And then finally, rationalization. So an example could be the perception that the upside of committing fraud outweighs the consequences of getting caught. Or perhaps even more common, the perception that what I'm doing is not that bad. It's a victimless crime. No one will get hurt, or so on. So when you dig into this psychology a little bit, when you look inward or when you look around your company, you probably know where you fall in that 10-80-10 crowd. But do you know where your colleagues fall? Do you know where your business partners fall? Do you know where 100% of your suppliers fall? Maybe not. Probably not. So therein really lies the importance of maintaining a robust system that can detect and deter fraud so that your operation does not unwittingly become complicit in a fraud scheme. So it's required again that all certified operations maintain an organic fraud prevention plan. It's reviewed annually by your certification body, and the effectiveness of your fraud prevention plan is evaluated during the annual inspection. So what should it include, right? What should you be thinking about when developing an organic fraud prevention plan? So you'll want to really diagram your supply chain here, the flow of products through your systems, through your ownership. Even if you don't take physical possession of them, it's helpful to visualize how these products flow while they're in your ownership to identify critical control points, which would be opportunities where fraud could occur. You'll want to conduct a vulnerability assessment to identify the weaknesses in your operation. And for each of those vulnerabilities that are identified, you want to develop mitigation measures that you can take in the event that your systems are not strong enough to prevent organic fraud. And you'll need to develop reporting procedures as well. So it is a requirement that if you detect fraud or suspect fraud, that you report that to your certifier so that you can work together to get to the bottom of it and to hopefully weed out a bad actor and to protect your business against organic fraud. So the fraud prevention plan, otherwise known as the OFPP, we have a lot of abbreviations here, a lot of acronyms. Again, it should really be a living document and it should be reflective of your risks in real time. So you're not going to just conduct a one and done vulnerability assessment. This is something that should at least be done on an annual basis just to take inventory of your risks and whether they've been appropriately identified so that you can mitigate them. So it's far too easy sometimes to think of organic fraud as something that just happens to you. This is referred to as external fraud, but there's all kinds of external factors and opportunities that can cause you to be a victim of fraud, as well as some internal factors here as well. So we'll jump into this a little bit. When you're looking at your supply chain or when you're looking at external factors, an awareness of who you're working with. Do you know your suppliers well? Do they have a history of sanctions? Are they operating in a high-risk region or in a high-risk supply chain? More complex supply chains where products are being sourced from multiple locations, where there's an increased frequency of blending. Those are really easy vectors sometimes for non-organic material to be introduced into an organic supply chain. So in general, the more times a product is changing hands or is being blended with other products, that's reflective of a more complex supply chain and a higher risk supply chain. Products or inputs that fetch a price premium, high value here, really can be a motivator, can be an incentive for organic fraud, especially when the delta between the price for non-organic and organic is greater. High demand, low supply. Certainly some commodities that have a lot of ebb and flow to them that are in routinely high demand, but sometimes, for example, subject to weather events or geopolitical events, can be prime for organic fraud. And organic certificates, organic documentation provided by entities who you might be purchasing from can be altered, can be adulterated, and can misrepresent organic products. So those are all great examples of external fraud. And I think that these are oftentimes kind of the first things that come to mind, again, through that mentality that fraud is something that might happen to you. Well, it's equally as important to really look at the drivers and opportunities for fraud within your organization. So the factors that you see here can provide the motivation, the opportunity, or the rationale, or all three, for fraud to occur within your organization. So again, the composition of your ingredients or formulas is one. Are you transacting, again, products that fetch a premium price, or do you have a facility that has a high cost of goods sold, right? Employee training, is an area that you can sometimes see, maybe unintentional, but bad policies start to permeate through your operation. Development of policies and procedures. You really have to think of the ways that fraud could be introduced within your facility and develop policies, procedures, and mitigating steps to deter and to detect fraud as it might occur. Your audit records themselves, again, are they what they're purported to be? Do you have a really good internal process for auditing records as you receive them from your suppliers? Do you have a good internal process for auditing the records that are created on your production line or your sales records? All of these are ways that you can look inward to better detect and deter organic fraud. And really, again, follow the money. The main motivation here for fraud, there's no two ways about it, is economic gain. So really be thinking about these pressures as they might apply to your operation. Okay, are you still with me? I hope so. Does this sound like a lot? It's okay. It is a lot. Becoming organic certified is a significant achievement, but there's no way around the fact that gaining certification is a process. It requires that you become familiar with a whole new set of regulations. It requires that these regulations become integral to the way that you conduct your business, choose your suppliers, your trade partners, set up your facility, and so on. But it also should be considered an investment here and potentially a transformative business decision, providing you access to a $71 billion global market, which is growing at 5.2% year over year here in the US. So not only that, but the growth rate of organic products really has been trending steadily upward for about the last 5 years. So if you've made the decision that participating in the organic global marketplace is integral to your business, well, congratulations, you're in a growing industry. And at only 5% of the global food market, organic really has a lot of upside, really has a long way to run here. So all that being said, becoming certified can be disruptive to your business. There's no doubt about that. You have to learn new requirements, implement segregation and labeling procedures, adapt your record keeping systems, and all of this, all while keeping your lights on, all while keeping your customers satisfied. It's not easy, but you've come this far. You've decided that the upside is worth the effort, and you've decided to make the investment. So you might as well get it right. So let's explore some ways that we can kind of ease this transition into organic certification and minimize disruption to your business as you advance through the process. So really what you want to do is develop a pre-certification roadmap, a detailed project plan that outlines the steps, the timelines, the roles, right? The team that you're going to assemble, contingencies for certification. So assign your internal champions for compliance. Who's really going to dig into the regulations, really dig into the documentation and how these procedures need to be integrated into your operation to promote organic compliance. You can track milestones, right, as you build towards achieving certification for getting your organic system plan completed, getting your organic suppliers in order, setting up your facility, right? So you can track these in Gantt charts or project management tools. Develop backup plans for sourcing. Again, have 2 to 3 backups while maybe some of your suppliers are still pursuing certification of their own. Train your staff. Train them early, train them often. Conduct organic workshops on the organic standards. Train your production teams to the new SOPs for labeling, for product segregation, for sanitation, for record keeping. Think about this ahead of your initial organic audit because it really can provide a much quicker path to obtaining your certification. Run organic and non-organic systems in parallel, right? So even before your audit, develop color-coded labels. Think about where you're going to be storing your organic products, how they're going to be physically segregated and identified from non-organic products to avoid cross-contamination. Develop your identity-preserved audit trail, right? One for conventional, one for organic, and then test and trial these record-keeping systems and IP procedures before your audit to make sure that they're working in the way that you expect them to. Start auditing your suppliers, making sure that they are maintaining current and valid organic certification. Verify inputs, beforehand to avoid disruptions. So request these certificates and input approvals early. Build relationships with multiple certified suppliers to mitigate your risk, and become familiar with various resources where you can look up compliance for non-organic ingredients, right? Organic Materials Review Institute is a really good resource. California Department of Food and Ag, Washington State Department of Ag, they all maintain great databases on ingredients and processing aids and so on. So familiarize yourself with these resources that are there to help you with your input verification. Transition to digital record keeping systems if it's within your ability to do so, right? There are some wonderful systems that enable barcoding for all of your ingredients, for tracking your lot codes, scanning these things into and out of your inventory. There are so many great tools that can automate this and make it easier for you. Perform mock audits. One thing that you'll want to develop is organic oversight as part of your internal audit process, right? So you can even simulate an organic audit using organic checklists. You can contact SCS if you're working with us on your certification and get those checklists ahead of time to where you can trial this. You can integrate this into your internal audit system. Anticipate findings and leave time for corrective actions. Again, this is all a part of the process. Design compliant labels before production. As you're probably aware, it can take some time to get your labels printed. As you may not be aware, one of the most common mistakes in organic production is printing labels prior to having them approved by your certifier. That can lead to expensive mistakes. You really should make sure that all of your labels before they go to print have the design approved by your certifier, have our stamp of approval so that you don't send something non-compliant to print. Set aside a budget for certification related expenses, right? So yes, there are organic certification and auditing fees, but your label redesign, changes to your supply chain, right? Finding new suppliers, developing training procedures and system upgrades. Sometimes there can be costs associated with that. As a reminder, there are a lot of cost share incentives out there, either through USDA or through your state organic programs. So inquire with SCS about what cost share options are available to help offset that cost for organic certification. So as you're thinking about this, really, what can I do now, right? I want to become certified. I know I need certification. What should I be doing? Well, first and foremost, understand the regulations that you're being audited to. Really engage with them. Reach out to your certifier, and they'll help you understand how they apply to your operation. Are you uncertified? Start the process now. If you're importing products, you can expect disruptions. Even if you're just trading organic products here domestically, more than likely you're not going to be able to transact those now without certification. So if you've not yet started, there is no better time than today. Enforcement is already underway. And always be looking, checking back with SCS for our upcoming webinars and trainings. We have a lot that's always coming onto the calendar here. So keep an eye on what we're putting out there, because you'll find that the resources that we're creating and putting out there via webinars, trainings, and so on can be really helpful. So reach out to us, contact SCS as your certifier proactively. We are here to help. So that really brings us to the end of the discussion around what you can be doing to prepare for organic certification. Keep in mind that SCS operates not only within the organic space. We offer a range of complementary services, non-GMO project, gluten-free, plant-based, fair trade, all of your food safety audits, regenerative organic. There's really almost no space within the food and ag certification landscape where we're not operating. And we also provide consulting services as well. We do have an entirely separate legal entity that can provide consultancy and advisory support. If you're having a hard time knowing where to get started, you can reach out to us. You know, we can support you with organic certification. We can support you with developing a fraud prevention plan, with food safety systems, ESG reporting, and so much more. So reach out to us, engage with us early, engage with us often. Again, we're always here to help. So with that, we do have a few minutes now. If you have any questions about the material that we covered today, or for that matter, material that we did not cover today, again, you can put them in the questions box that should appear towards the top of your navigation panel. And I do have a couple coming in here already. Is SCS Global Services able to issue NOP import certificates? NOP import or export certificates? Yes, both. So we do certify operations that are outside of the United States, and we're issuing the NOP import certificates for their shipments into the US. We can also issue export certificates. So if you're a stateside exporter here as well, that's something that we didn't cover today, but yes, we can issue the certificates for the outbound as well. What if a distributor is buying and selling products that are not for retail, let's see, but for food service? Can this be stored at a third-party warehouse if it is strictly box in, box out? Great question. So if this is a non-retail product, the distributor of that product is going to need to be certified. That exemption really only applies to operations that are transacting non-retail product. That are transacting retail product. Non-retail product, transacting non-retail product is not exempt. So the distributor needs to be certified. However, the third-party logistics warehouse that is strictly storing, that does not take legal ownership of that product, as long as that product is in a fully sealed, tamper-evident container, the third-party warehouse does not need to be certified. The distributor does. Can we do an audit in St. Lucia? That sounds great. Let's go to St. Lucia. Yes, we can absolutely help you in St. Lucia. For transport to transport, do we need to provide the cleaning log of the auger? Yes. So one thing that we will need to see here, that's a great, great question. So um, even exempt operations, such as transloading, they still do need to maintain records that can basically demonstrate kind of baseline compliance. So we have to have a record of the use of that transloader. And yes, if they are transloading organic product, they will be needing to maintain a cleaning log. So how will that be audited? It will most likely be requested from the certifier of whichever certified operation is downstream from the use of that transloader. So as that product moves through that transloader downstream through transport to the next organic certified operation that receives that product, the certifier of that operation should be looking back up through all of the movements of that product, including through that uncertified transloader, to make sure that they do maintain that basic documentation like a cleaning log. Really, really good question. Do customs brokers need to be certified? Customs brokers do not have to be certified. The importer of record or the exporter of record do, but customs brokers are an example of an operation that is still exempt. What constitutes tamper-proof packaging? Does all retail packaging qualify as such? Good question. So a tamper-evident package for the purposes of organic needs to meet a few criteria here. One would need to be that it is fully enclosed and protects that product from any commingling or contact with prohibited materials. So something that you would see like produce trays. You might see melons, you might see peaches, strawberries. I mean, usually fresh produce is in packaging that is not impermeable because it off gases ethylene. It has to be able to release those gases, but that makes those containers porous. So typically a container that is containing fresh produce is not going to be a fully enclosed, sealed, tamper evident package. And that's the other thing here as well, is that there needs to be some mechanism to see if that product has been opened, some kind of a tamper evident seal, tape, or so on, that if it's broken, it makes it apparent so that that product would then be considered tampered with or adulterated. Any examples of an organic fraud flow diagram, as it seems like this could be difficult to put together? It can be difficult, but really once you start diagramming how products flow through your supply chain, the critical control points really can start to stand out here to you. Reach out to us. We'll see if we can provide an example to you. And if you really are needing support getting started on that fraud prevention plan, we can link you up with somebody that can support you on that. Some great questions coming in here. Does SCS have the ability to do a GFSI audit program strictly for distributors? Yes, so we offer all of the GFSI level audits, including for distributors. So reach out to us and we'll be happy to connect you with our team and can take care of your GFSI audit needs. If the final certified company that facilitates the transport of product from a foreign country to the US is based in the US, are they the importer or exporter? That would most likely be the exporter who is facilitating the transport and the trade of the product into the US. Sometimes the distinction can be a little bit blurry here. So if you have a very specific question that kind of relates to one of your suppliers, reach out to us so that we can make sure to advise correctly on that, because there can be some nuance to this. All right, I'll go through a couple more questions here. We've got quite a few of them, and then I'll make sure to follow up with anyone else after the webinar here. For organic tamper evident products, does the entire supply chain need to be certified? Yes, with the exception of somebody who is transacting only product in a retail package. But in general, yes, your entire supply chain does need to be certified. Good question here. It's asking if import of retail packaged product is exempt from certification box in, box out. No. The import of all organic products, even if it's retail only, requires certification. And if the importer of record is not certified, they can expect that product to be rejected at the port of entry. And then finally, if a tote breaks during the unloading process, does the product lose its organic integrity? So if this was a tamper evident package that broke during the process, then likely yes. Now, if this comes into your facility, if you do some repacking, if you do some handling and repacking or breaking down large units into smaller units of like a bulk product here, you're going to break that tote. But those activities, if they happen within your facility, should be included in the scope of your certification. But really, if you're, say, a box in, box out operation, and something comes into your possession, that tamper evident seal breaks, then more than likely that product would need to be redirected as non-organic product. Really good questions. Well, thanks again, everybody. That concludes the webinar today. Again, everyone that was in attendance will receive a recording of this webinar. And please do feel free to reach out to me, reach out to SCS, as we're here to help you as you pursue your organic certification. Take care, everybody. Thank you.